Great, I see the recording started. Thank you.
Okay, good to go.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the remote meeting of the Operational Delivery Committee on the 11th of March 2021. Please note that the public section of the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. Can all attendees switch off their camera and mute their microphone when not speaking? The camera and microphone should only be switched on when you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this is contained in the guidance issued to you previously. Can I also extend a very warm welcome to auditors from Audit Scotland who are observing the proceedings at today's committee as part of the Best Value Audit. Can I please ask the clerk to advise of the members participating in today's committee and for all members to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk so that this is clear in a recording of the meeting and also be recorded by the clerk for the minute. Mrs. McBain, can you please do the roll call?
Thank you, Convener. I'll just do a quick roll call for the recording, so could members please advise that they're present. So Convener?
Present.
Councillor Graham?
Present.
Councillor Cormie?
Present.
Councillor Delaney?
Present.
Councillor Leslie Dunbar?
Present.
Councillor Hendrickson?
Present.
Councillor Lumsden?
Present.
Councillor MacDonald?
Present.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Present.
Councillor McClellan?
Present.
Councillor Audrey Nicholl?
Present.
Councillor Radley?
Present.
And Councillor Stewart?
Present.
Okay, thank you, Convener. That's all 13 members present.
Thank you, Mrs. McBain. For your information, councillors observing today's meeting should not activate their camera and should mute their microphone. They should play no part in today's meeting. If members of the committee wish to speak or raise their virtual hand, they should enter speak in the chat channel or raise their hand, and this will be visible to all in the meeting. Clerk and myself will monitor such requests. Alternatively, members can verbally indicate they wish to speak if not possible to message or by signalling by activating their camera. If any members lose connection or have any technical issues during the meeting, they should alert the clerk, if possible, by private chat, and that'll be out with this meeting chat, so that they can make the convener aware of the issue. So if we can just start the meeting today. There are no items of urgent business at this time. There are no exempt items of business. Can I ask if any members have any declarations of interest they wish to declare now? So I take that as a no. Thank you. There are no requests for deputation at this time. Can we please go through the minutes of the previous meeting? I'll go through page by page, and if anybody actually wants to note anything or whatever, just let me know. Otherwise, I shall assume that as I go through the pages, they're fine. So page 3, page 4.
Convener, sorry, Councillor Nicholl's got her hand up. And
I'm sorry,
sorry.
Apologies. Councillor Nicholl.
No, thank you, Convener. Just in relation to the minute as you're going through it, I'm not actually sure which page it's on, but just a question about the urgent motion that I took to the last committee, and that's obviously the details of which are outlined in the minute. Can I just ask a couple of questions in relation to that?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you. First of all, the motion resulted, the committee agreed that there would be a service update provided in relation to some issues with our heating network in Tory. And first of all, I would like to thank officers for their assistance in resolving the issue. A service update has been provided on the matter. However, there's one part of the service update that is still outstanding. So it was just to maybe ask if there was an update on when that will be forthcoming. Thank you, Convener.
So can I just ask, so which item is actually, do you feel is still missing, Councillor Nicholl?
The motion was in two parts, Convener. The first part related to just an assurance around the heating issue being resolved, and the second part related to support or potential support being given to residents who may encounter some financial hardship because of extra heating costs. I am beginning to receive some inquiries from constituents in that position, so I was just wondering if there was an update on that part of the service update. Thank you.
I haven't seen an update. Perhaps we could ask an officer in a wee bit just to see if they can tell us if there is an update. Failing that, though, if I just carry on through the minutes, Councillor Cormier, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, convener. It's on page 4. It's regarding the service update to be provided in due course in relation to the smart bins. Now, these bins, the sensors that were put on the belly bins, the city centre, are very similar. It's quite a simple update that I want. If these sensors that put on the belly bins were successful, there has been no data shown on that, and you know, if there is an update possible and when we're likely to get it. You know, the belly bins were on the go now for about 3 years, I would think. And I don't know if they're still in use, the sensors within these bins. It's just a simple, you know, answer. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I thought we had an update, to be honest, Councillor Cormier, and I recall the answer was that the cardboard had actually been obscuring the sensor. I understood we had an update, and that it was found that cardboard had been obscuring the sensor, which actually caused them not to work.
Oh, I've never seen that update. I don't know who got that. I don't know if any other members seen it. I've been asking for that for quite some time.
Well, I'm quite sure that. Mr. Riley, you want to come in there?
Yeah, thank you, convener. Yes, if I may, through yourself to Councillor Cormier. The service is done an update, but it hasn't been circulated yet to committee. The convener is correct. There has been conversations about the use of smart technology within the waste service for communal bins, but this particular one is referring to the smart bins used for litter in the city centre. So, Councillor Cormier, you are correct. It hasn't been circulated yet, but there is one to be sent out.
Okay, thank you, convener. Thank you, Mr. Riley. I suppose my question is, has the sensors been successful in the belly bins, and are they still in use?
Through convener, yes, the belly bins are still in use. It's a partnership arrangement with the BID, the Business Improvement District, and they sponsor. So the smart bins are still in use within the city and at the beachfront.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And convener, if I may, just to come back to Councillor Nicholl's point, Stephen Booth, Chief Officer of Corporate Landlord, isn't at the meeting this afternoon, but I will follow up with Stephen in terms of getting that response out to councillors, if that's okay.
That would be very much appreciated, I'm sure, wouldn't it, Councillor Nicholl? Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, convener and Councillor Nicholl. It's Ronnie Ferguson here, Gas and Cyclical Maintenance Manager.
Oh, yes.
Hi, Councillor Nicholl. I can assure you that we are discussing with housing at the moment regarding the extra payments for the electric. I've circulated all the relevant information and it is being discussed at the moment.
You know, just to pass on my thanks to Mr. Ferguson. He was a great source of information and support when we had the issues. So I appreciate that update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I'll just push on with the minutes, previous minutes. So that was page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and finally page 13. Are we all happy with those minutes? Or
Agreed.
great, thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So moving on now to the committee planner on page 15. Are there any questions relating to the planner? Okay. There are no notices of motion.
Sorry, convener, just had a really quick question about the planner. It's just it's about the payment to foster carers, adopters and kinship. It's on the agenda. We can all see that. I'm surprised why it says delayed and additional work. Is that just an old comment from a previous committee? Just have that confirmed.
Convener, I can just confirm that, yes, it was previously down to come to the last committee, so that is just historic information to show that it was delayed.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. So there are no notices of motion, no notices or referrals from other committees. Can we go on to item 9.1, please? Which is the performance report. And can I ask that Mr. Murchie just give us a very brief introduction before we open it up to members for questions?
Yeah, thanks very much, convener. So as you say, if the committee indulged me, I was just proposing to go through the report and say a few words on the exceptions which officers have pulled out and invite questions once I've done that. So as you know, many of the services are, of course, still working in extraordinary circumstances. So the exceptions that we're highlighting in this cycle, and there are quite a few today, should be considered in that context. Firstly, housing voids maintenance on page 29. Members are familiar with this issue and are receiving regular updates, including one, I believe, earlier today from Mr. McGowan, which is on the progress with improvement in that area, and particularly the activity managed through the ongoing improvement project. Recent performance is against the backdrop of operational restrictions due to COVID-19, and amongst the measures taken are a reassignment of internal resource and external procurement process, which has been approved, has begun to be put in place to tackle the backlog. So that's the first one on page 29. Moving on to page 36, analysis is provided there in relation to the number of school lunches provided to primary pupils. Clearly, this has been hugely impacted by the pandemic and resulting school closures. The analysis outlines not only the decline in numbers, which is to be expected, of course, but also the measures which schools have put in place to make dining rooms safe for children, as well as covering the provision of vouchers as an alternative to the school meals. Moving on, the percentage of HGV vehicles under 7 years old is on page 40, and we've highlighted that on the basis that performance has fallen in Q3. However, the analysis with that indicator notes that new vehicles are in order, which will bring performance back above target soon. We've highlighted first use checks for vehicles and plant for environmental services on page 42. This is a measure that hasn't met targets in quarters 2 or 3, and what that reflects is that not all pre-use equipment checks are being carried out as required. So in response to that, improved training has been put in place along with increased monitoring, which we believe will return that indicator to the target. In relation to the percentage of children's social work complaints resolved within time, which is on page 46, this is also the subject of a formal improvement project as per the Council's performance management framework. And whilst the data shows this is still below the target, there's been consistent improvement over the past 3 quarters, which we've managed to achieve through joint working between the service and customer feedback team. I would also say that the nature of complaints received by the social work team are often complex, which can impact on the ability to resolve these within timescales. Regardless of that, however, processes ensure that complainants are always made fully aware of the progress of their complaints, particularly where there's been a delay. With regard to the percentage of initial child protection case conferences held within 21 days, which is on page 48, steps have been put in place to achieve a blended in-person and virtual model for case conferences. The analysis that we've provided highlights difficulties faced in meeting the timescale in all cases due to factors which are outside the Council's control. That includes the availability of family members sometimes and the coordination of the dates with other agencies, given that these are multi-agency conferences. The processes that we have continued to be amended to reduce delays as far as possible, but the service are proposing here that the target for this measure is changed from 100% within 21 days to 80% to ensure that while we're still aiming for a high standard, it's one that's achievable. The percentage of looked after children in foster care we've highlighted on page 50. This is higher than we'd want, but we are seeing small and consistent reductions in the numbers of children within foster placement, and that is very much in line with shifting the balance of care and ensuring that children remain at home or in kinship care wherever possible. The analysis will highlight that the target for this is likely to be achieved over a number of years to avoid disruption for children who are in settled placements. A number of measures are being implemented to maintain the improvements. The improvements that we've seen to date, and that includes realignment of resources within children's social work services and also the development of the family wellbeing hubs. Just 2 or 3 more, which you'd be glad to hear, Convener. On page 61, we've highlighted the percentage of freedom of information requests responded to within the required timescale, which you will see has dropped over the last year. There are a number of factors impacting on that, including services prioritising pandemic response. There's been some disruption for the same reason to training for responders to freedom of information requests. And as well as that, we've seen an increase in the overall actual numbers of requests that we've received. An improvement plan is in place in that area, and figures to date for Q4, which are not yet obviously included within the report, do show a significant return to higher performance levels. On page 66, the percentage of digital and technology incidents resolved within timescale fell in December. During that period, there have been a number of improvements that we've implemented which have taken a bit of time to bed in, including dedicated queue managers for those incidents. And like the previous item on FOI requests, the most recent data that we have for January, again, not yet included in the report, does show, again, a significant improvement, which we expect to continue. And lastly, we also highlighted this last cycle, the indicator showing the percentage of tenants satisfied with the standard of their home when moving in. As we advised last cycle, the number of new tenants completing the survey is relatively low, and officers have recommenced telephone surveys of new tenants to get a more representative sample. Sorry that took a bit of time, Convener. As I said, there were a number of exceptions that we thought it was worthwhile highlighting and pulling out for the committee. Just for completeness, I would say that there are 2 or 3 other areas where there are live improvement projects ongoing, which we've not explicitly highlighted today. Those include housing, tenant arrears, street lighting, and in some areas of the council sickness absence. Thank you, Convener. I'd be happy, and along with my colleagues, to take any questions.
Mr. Murchie, many thanks for that very comprehensive introduction. I see that there's a question from Councillor Lumsden.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. It's just around our favourite topic, which seems to be void in this committee. page 31, Mr. Murchie mentions that there's an external procurement process taking place to try and absorb 150 to 200 of our void properties. Do we know how quickly that will have an effect on our numbers that we're seeing today to try and get that to go in the right direction?
I could pass that to Mr. McGowan. Thank you.
Mr. McGowan.
Thank you, convener. I think Mr. Riley wants to answer this when I can see him coming in. Apologies.
Okay, yes,
Apologies.
Mr. Riley.
Thank you, convener. I just rescued Mr. McGowan in this respect because he wouldn't have this information. So, if I may, Councillor Lumsden, yeah, we are going through the procurement process now for interested companies to come in and do up to 200 properties for us to get these numbers down. Quite a lot of the procurement process has been completed. We've engaged with the local market and obtained noted interests. We've got suitable contractors to fill out dynamic purchasing framework applications, and that was expected to be completed on the 11th today. Contractors approved and added to the framework will be complete by the 26th of March. Tender documents are completed, so we've got those prepared for issue. We look to be issuing tender documents on the 29th of March and expecting tenders to be returned on the 16th of April. We then have to assess tenders, quality and price scoring, which we intend to have completed by the 30th of April. And then with health and safety planning periods and material leadings, we're looking for contractors to start on the voids work around about the 17th of May. Then the programme will come in, it'll be the types of properties that we have and what the work is required, which will depend upon the time frame of getting the properties completed. And obviously we'll have that information to report back to committee when we move forward.
Okay, so if I may convener, then I guess, Mr. Riley, it's probably going to be late summer before we see the impact of that work on our void sort of numbers.
That's correct, Councillor Lumsden.
Okay, thank you.
I think that Councillor Cormie was next with a question.
Convener, it's on page 64, digital technology. I'm still getting a lot of complaints regarding especially elderly folk phoning up, and they're getting through right away, and it says that the abandon rate, you're way up to 49%, and it's been blamed on folk putting the phone down. I'm getting the dead opposite. I'm being told that they're being cut off.
Do we have an officer who's able to answer that?
Hello, convener. I'll take if that's okay.
Mr. MacDonald, of course.
No problem. Thank you for the question, Councillor Cormie. Just to clarify, that's actually internal calls for digital and technology team that we're discussing. The call volumes are relatively low as well. And what I would say is that there's other approaches for our internal staff to contact the digital and technology team. If, I'm happy to pick up your concerns regarding contact across the centre from citizens. We're not aware of many complaints or contact coming through that way that's resulting in calls not getting through or anything like that, but more than happy to take any individual concerns and look at those if it would be helpful.
Yeah, but thanks, Mr. McDonald, for that. But I mean, the things that elected members are getting, and I know there's others getting it as well, especially around about sheltered housing and elderly folk, they've given up trying to phone. They can't afford to wait on the phone for so long. And there's certainly being abandoning throwing the phone down because they've got all the time in the world to wait. They're being cut off. I don't know how that is coming about.
So, Councillor Cormie, I'm more than happy to take any individual inquiries and investigate those further. I would say that from the information that we're getting, it's not as severe as what I'm hearing from yourself, but I'm more than happy to work with any elected members on those concerns coming through, and more than happy to investigate that and come back to you outside this meeting if that would be helpful.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cormie. Now, I can see quite a few hands up. I can't actually work out who they are other than Councillor Nicholl, Councillor Roger Nicholl. So forgive me. I'll ask Councillor Nicholl first, and then if I can't then work out who those are asking questions are.
Do you want me just
to
let you know, convener, we've got Councillor MacDonald, Councillor Graham and Councillor Hendrickson as the other 3 members.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, convener. Just a quick question in relation to on page 68. Mr. Murchie spoke about the percentage of tenants satisfied with the standard of their home when moving in, and gave a helpful explanation around some of the work that's been done there and the relatively modest uptake in relation to providing feedback. But in respect of those who have provided feedback to inform those statistics, I'm just wondering if there are some indications of what sorts of issues have been identified around that, and what, or if there is something that we can do, there's some action that we can take on that. Thank you.
Mr. Murchie.
Convener, yes, and when we reported on this at the last meeting, I think we did flag up that we believed at least some of that negative feedback did relate to the time waiting to get into the property, which takes us back to the voids issue. But Mr. McGowan may well have more detail than myself.
Mr. McGowan.
Yes, through yourself, convener. Yeah, Mr. Murchie's right, Councillor Nicholl. But what we do have is further detail, and if it's agreeable, then what I can do is circulate that separately so you can see the issues that are being raised. But yeah, largely they're around the time being taken to get into the property.
Do you have any more questions, Councillor Nicholl? Oh dear, Councillor Nicholl's frozen. Right. Perhaps, well, clearly, Councillor Nicholl's got a bit of a problem with her connection. Can I go to Councillor MacDonald just now? And if Councillor Nicholl comes back in again, we can just go back to her. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, convener. My question is around the fleet and vehicles under 7 years old, and I note that we have 21 vehicles on order, which is great. And I just wanted to ask that you know, if there are any holds up in that, do you think maybe is it a result of COVID, or is it perhaps a result of Brexit? And the reason I ask is that at a recent garage inspection for MOT, it was very it was said to me that it was actually my husband, that the reason that things were taking so long was that it is taking longer for parts, and but maybe you know, to come from abroad. So it was really just to get a bit of background on that. And the second very small question was just to understand what unfair wear and tear is. It wasn't a term that I had that I know anything about. Thank you.
Mr. Riley, do you want to answer those questions?
Yes, through yourself, convener. And if Councillor MacDonald needs any other information, I've got the fleet manager committee as well, so he can probably get a bit more detail. In the first instance, we have what's called, for your second part of your question, about fair wear and tear and unfair wear and tear. Fair wear and tear is mainly through let's say something like your tyres or your windscreen wipers or moving parts within the vehicle as part of the normal operation. They will wear and eventually wear out and need replacing, and that's called fair wear and tear. The easiest for unfair wear and tear is if there's a bump, a dent, a scratch on the paintwork or bodywork, or if a tyre's been split, or there's been other damage which isn't part of the natural aging and use of the vehicle, then that is classed as unfair wear and tear. So I trust that answers the inquiry on that. The first question with regard to vehicles over 7 years, life of vehicles, yeah, there was a freeze on procurement, which was a decision that we took corporately because of the new technologies coming in, the direction of travel regarding hydrogen and electric vehicles, and the change in the legislation of where will we be in 2025, 2030, and what will we be expected to do as a council. Obviously, the cost of some of these vehicles, the electric and the hydrogen, particularly on the heavy goods, are much, much more expensive than we currently purchase on the carbon fleet. So we took a pause because we didn't want to be replacing carbon vehicles with carbon vehicles if in 5-10 years time we should have all electric or all hydrogen. And we looked at that, and there was an exercise done to compare what our capital replacement budget was, how we can best use the capital budget that we have to replace with new technologies, and to look at the potential for grant funding. And should we actually take the plunge to buy pure electric, pure hydrogen, or in some cases, because of the technology being new and untried, should we go dual fuel? And that's why there's been a delay on purchasing. Yes, COVID has caused problems in purchasing and manufacturing of vehicles as well, and that would have impacted, and also on parts. And maybe I'm not aware, and maybe Mr. White can add to this if we need that information. Brexit may have caused a bit of a delay as well, but not that I'm aware of. So that's the main reason why we've had that gap and that increase in the age of the fleet. We are now back to procuring, and Mr. White has put in a number of orders, including 21 dual fuel refuse vehicles, which are hydrogen carbon dual fuel. But as with procurement on specialist vehicles, sometimes this can take over 6 months, and it's dependent upon what everybody else within the industry is purchasing as well, because there's only so many manufacturers and there's only so much production space. So sometimes it can take a bit longer to get the replacements in. Hopefully that answers fully what you were wanting, but if Mr. White wants to add any more, I'm sure he
No, absolutely. Thank you very much through you, convener. That answers my question. I hadn't, I didn't know all that, so that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. There are quite exciting plans that this council are actually putting forward, so that's good. Councillor Nicholl, I know that you've managed to get connected again. Do you want to come back in? You were actually in the middle of having your question answered, and then you were so cruelly cut off.
That's kind of you, convener. I got the sort of first bit. I think Mr. Murchie was just handing over to a colleague when I froze out. So, but I don't want to take up time. If there's a short and brief update, that would be appreciated.
I'm sure we can ask officers for something like that. Councillor Hendrickson, I believe you are next.
Thank you, convener. Just a very simple question on page 35 regarding the inspection and number of overview correction actions requested as a month end. It says that the outstanding action was closed in October and November during a BSI inspection, and I just wondered what a BSI inspection actually was.
Mr. Riley, are you wanting to answer that?
Yes, I shall come in and answer that. Again, through yourself, convener, I've got Mr. Campbell, Andy Campbell, available as well if Councillor Henrickson, excuse me, Henrickson needs any more information. Our inspection is the accreditation, ISO accreditation, BSI, for school meals. And what happens when we get an inspection by the accreditation organisation, if there are any corrective actions to be done, those are noted. We take the action to cover off the defect as such, and then they come back in and re-inspect and then close it off. However, with COVID, we had one corrective action on the inspection, but due to COVID, they couldn't come and check the corrective action that we'd taken to close off that. So it's remained open for some time, even though we'd completed that action. Unfortunately, because it's an annual target, that will be on till the end of the year. But moving forward, hopefully as we come out of COVID, and also with the accreditors, we've found a way that they can actually come in and do a virtual inspection and check some of the corrective actions if they've identified things that need improvement. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Henrickson, but if you need some more detail.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Riley. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question now from Councillor Graham.
Okay, thanks, Convener. It's just a quick question. Mr. Murphy touched on it when he was doing his introduction, and it was on page 48, case conferences, and they were looking to get it reduced from 100% to 80%. Who grants the permission? Is it ourselves, or is it done by other committees, or is it done internally by officer?
Mr. Murphy?
So in terms of changing the target?
Yeah.
Sorry, I think this committee has it within its ability to agree that target change, Convener. At point generally, we would want to be we'd want to have the ability throughout the year to review our targets, make sure that they're appropriate and realistic, and can move them up or down. So I think it's completely within the ability of this committee to do that.
Yeah. So do we need a report on it, or do you want us to make a decision just now, or what is it? Sorry.
Yeah, I think if the committee are okay with the proposal made by officers, then we'll reflect that in the next report, Convener.
Okay, thank you. We could perhaps add that to the recommendations as well. So we will get to agree those in a wee bit. Are you content with that, Councillor Graham?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, cheers.
Councillor Cormie, I think you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you for allowing me back in there, Convener. We're seeing Mr. Riley there, who was very helpful regarding building service repairs over Christmas and New Year. But the complaints resolved within the timescale 1 and 2, I mean, we're really almost hitting rock bottom now. Has that been resolved? And I appreciate, you know, the COVID situation and over Christmas and New Year. And, you know, we had families suffered over that period. Now we're into March. Has that been brought forward and we're back on an even keel yet, Mr. Williamson? I see you there.
And Mr. Williamson, do you want to come in here?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Cormie. Yes, there was a dip in December, quite a substantial dip in the responses. We did have quite a few staff on annual leave at the time. But what we have put in place is that the complaints are now part of the weekly team talks. Their line managers actually go through the report on a weekly basis with the individual members of staff. And we're working very closely with the customer feedback team, additional training to the staff members to ensure that we get these complaints answered within the time scale and get the performance back up. And
is there any indication, Mr. Williamson, that it is actually coming back up? are we having to pull in private contractors to get these things resolved? Because, I mean, some families have had to suffer quite extensively.
A lot of these complaints are in relation to what would you say, the types of work that we're carrying out. People were asking why we weren't carrying out work during the restrictions. And to be fair, as I say, we weren't answering them in time. It's something as a service that we should have picked up a lot sooner. But as I say, we are now onto that. And as of today, the latest figure I've got is it's now sitting up at 28%. So it's heading in the right direction, but we will continue to work with the staff members and get that back up to the acceptable level.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Do I have any more questions? I can't see any more hands. Can we now go to the recommendations on page 21? So that's to note the report. And Mr. Murchie, how do you want to organise this changing the targets? We can then put those words into the recommendations.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I think it's actually helpful if we do add that as a recommendation, just to agree the proposed change to the target from 100% to 80% as set out, and then reference the indicator in the page number.
Okay, Mrs. McBain, can you add that, please?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I will do.
And are we all content then with those recommendations?
Happy to agree. Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
So thank you. So moving on to the next item, payment to foster carers. Could I please ask Mr. Simpson to give us a brief introduction?
Thank you, Convener. I'm happy to do that. I'm pleased to share with committee this afternoon our paper which sets out the range of fees and allowances paid to foster carers, adopters, kinship carers and associated services delivered by the Fostering and Adoption Service. Convener, priority will always be given to support young people and children to remain at home within their family. The Independent Care Review reinforced the need for all agencies to do much more to ensure this is achieved. However, there unfortunately will always be circumstances when a child cannot be cared for by their parents. In these circumstances, looking to extended family must always be our first consideration. Where, however, this is not viable, foster care is a resource that is often best placed to meet the needs of children. The committee should note there is a national shortage of foster carers, and this is most acutely felt in our cities. It is therefore important that Aberdeen City Council's fostering service ensures it supports the practical, emotional and financial needs of our carers to provide a competitive service, competitive with independent fostering agencies. These ingredients are the best way to meet the needs of Aberdeen City's children via a local fostering arrangement. The paper today sets out our proposals to redesign the Payment for Skills scheme, which is the fee element paid to foster carers. The revised scheme will hopefully attract more people to come forward to be considered as foster carers and allow us to more effectively ensure Aberdeen cares for Aberdeen's children. While a person's motivation must be a child-centric one, financial remuneration is a factor we need to consider. In recognition of the long-term impact of trauma and neglect, children who are placed for adoption often require additional support throughout their childhood. Payment of an adoption allowance recognises this and allows adopters to access additional support to mitigate against the risk of placements breaking down. The proposed uplift in fees and allowances set out in the report reflect both the increase in cost of living and a modest increase in the fee. These were fully costed and included within the budget that was agreed yesterday at Council. I'm hoping that helps members understand the context, Convener, but I'm happy, along with my colleague Mrs Maitland, to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Mr Simpson. Members, are there any questions? I don't see any hands. Oh, I see a hand. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much. I note from the report that there were various particularly outlined in the recruitment strategy about people who are being targeted to as potential foster carers. And I just wondered if it wasn't mentioned, but perhaps it has the Black and ethnic minority community been included in your thinking when it comes to potential foster carers?
Convener, if it's convenient, I'd like to bring in Mrs. Maitland, who's better placed to answer that question.
Mrs. Maitland.
Through you, Convener. Yes, we apologise if that's not been indicated on the recruitment strategy, but yes, of course, that is, as the report indicates, we want to encourage all society to apply to become foster carers, and indeed we have a percentage of Black minority ethnic carers in our currently, so yes, absolutely.
Thank you, that's very reassuring.
I have a question from Councillor Radley.
Thank you, Convener. It was just in relation to 3.3.9. There's a discussion regarding partial funding of legal fees for adoption and some circumstances where the council will absorb this cost. That section makes reference to those wishing to adopt through foster placements. However, you know, there are people who wish to adopt from kinship care placements. Will the partial funding of legal fees cover those wishing to adopt from a kinship care placement, and how are people made aware of that?
Convener, through yourself, if the plan for the child, if the agency plan for the child is that we look to secure adoption and that child is placed within a kinship arrangement, then the same qualification would apply to kinship carers as it would to adopters. And the local authority is required to provide the court with a report on the circumstances of the child who is going through, all children going through an adoption process. And so therefore we would be absolutely clear that the kinship carer would be fully aware of that circumstance should it be applied for in the circumstances you set out, Councillor Radley.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else? Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Convener. It's a quick question on 3.1.7. It was in terms of the moves from the IFAs to the council. There's mention of the training offered being of a very high quality and standard. I was just wondering if you could sort of elaborate on that and provide a wee bit of detail of what we offer. I take it we obviously offer to sort of go above and beyond in terms of what we can offer.
Mr. Simpson.
Convener, again, I'd like to bring in my colleague, Mrs. Maitland, who again is better placed to answer that than I.
Mrs. Maitland.
Through you, Convener. Actually, the local authority, Aberdeen City Council, in terms of the assessment of prospective foster carers, provide them with a significant amount of training. We do a prep to skills to foster group, but we also have expectations that they undertake what we call mandatory training before they go to the panel for approval, and thereafter their first year there's expectations that they continue to do mandatory training, in comparison to our IFA colleagues who actually don't undertake any mandatory training prior to approval. So this has been noted from foster carers who've come across to our service. They have remarked on the significant increase in improvement in training that they have received. We have a very varied and vast training timetable, including, for instance, we invested greatly in what we call TheraPlay. So, because obviously acknowledging that our children, sadly, that we have to care for come with a lot of trauma. So we want to equip the carers to be able to meet their needs and also to sustain placements, because clearly children's needs mean that the placements become very difficult. So I'm very, very happy to provide a copy of that training plan to Councillor McClellan, if that would be helpful. But we are, we do receive very good feedback from our carers about the level of training that they receive. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, through yourself, Convener. Thanks very much, Ms. Maitland, for providing that response. That's very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. Just a very quick question, but before I ask it, I just want to thank officers for this report. It was really informative and helpful to get this update. I appreciate a lot of work went into it. Just a very quick query about the proposal for the payments for foster carers. We know, and it was outlined in the report, that young adults can now stay in continuing care until the age of 21. And apologies if it is in the report and I've missed it. I was just wondering if the payment scheme extends all the way to that age. Thank you.
Mr. Simpson.
Convener, yes, it does. The guidance that sits behind the legislation requires, it places the expectation that there is no financial detriment to the carer from offering a continuing care placement beyond the age of 18.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
So I have one more question from Councillor Dunbar. Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Simpson, I'd like to say that, I welcome this report and I see it really as establishing a very strong foundation for moving forward in terms of our local authority being able to deliver on the promise. Would you confirm that?
Councillor Dunbar, absolutely, I would support that through yourself, Convener. That I would. I think the promise sets out a challenge to all parts of the council and indeed of society as to how it can support children to remain within their communities as much as possible. We see Aberdeen as a community. We would want children to remain within our community, close to their birth family, to their schools where they have friends and connections and people who know them best. So therefore this is aimed at how we can grow our own service, but also at the same time recognise the importance that kinship care provides in keeping children within their extended family where it's safe to do so. So this for me is one strand of many that I think will help us deliver on many of the aspirations and the challenges that the Independent Care Review sets out, Councillor Dunbar.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. So I have one more question on my list, and that's from Councillor Henriksson.
Thank you, Convener. It's on page 82. I take it it's just an arrow on table 4, 16 to 18. The 1.5% increase for 21-22 for that age group. There's no change from the 2020 to 2021 figure, and I just wondered if that's an error, because the cost thing actually does have an increase as far as if I'm reading the table correctly.
Mr. Simpson, are you able to answer that one?
Through yourself, Convener, Councillor Henriksson, I congratulate you on your eagle eye. I would actually confirm that is an error, and the figure that you see in front of you is the new cost. It's not the old cost, so we've duplicated the new cost twice, I suppose, of putting in the old cost. So please be assured that what you're seeing in front of you is the new cost.
Thank you very much, Convener. That I think that's good for clarity. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't have any more questions on my list. So can we just go to the recommendations, please, on page 75? Are we happy to agree those?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. So let's go now to 10.2, domestic abuse council housing policy. And can I ask Mr. McGowan to give us an introduction before I open it up to members for questions?
Yes, thank you, Convener. We're seeking today approval to introduce this council housing domestic abuse policy, as well as changes to delegated powers as set out in the recommendations. Aberdeen City Council is the 5th largest social landlord in the country, and it's important that we have a policy in place that reflects the legislation and demonstrates to tenants and prospective tenants that we have a zero tolerance approach to domestic abuse. And the policy that you have before you today for consideration sets that out. The report itself details the legislation, the aspects of the legislation we have to take into account, and also sets out where we believe that domestic abuse is underreported as a crime due to the nature of the offence and the behaviours and sets out how as a landlord we seek to support people who are coming in to ask us for housing or are current tenants of ours. And one way we're seeking to do that, which is one of the recommendations, is to amend the delegated power for the Chief Officer of Early Intervention and Community Empowerment to provide or offer alternative accommodation to perpetrators of domestic abuse. That's to ensure that where there is a domestic abuse and allegations of domestic abuse, that we can move the alleged perpetrator and avoid the victim and potentially the victim's family having to move, potentially become homeless. So it's looking to support the victim, but also to provide some support to the perpetrator while we tackle the issues there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Can I ask members if there are any questions? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thank you very much for the report we have in front of us. I'm really pleased that this is now here for our deliberation. I wondered on page 96, Mr. McGowan, where the figures show, or we believe, that domestic abuse is significantly underreported. And I just wondered if we, first of all, had any understanding of by how much they might be underreported. And also really just to delve a little bit more into why Aberdeen's numbers are higher than those for, I suppose it's the average for the whole of Scotland. And I wondered if that was maybe, it could be one of many factors, and probably, but I just wondered if it was because, services here and the agencies that we have mean that more women do come forward. I'm just guessing, but it'd be interesting to know what others think.
Thank you. Through yourself, Convener. I think that evidence suggests that domestic abuse, like some other crimes, for example, hate crime, are underreported. People are worried to come forward or scared to come forward. And while we try and promote the services that we have as effectively as we can, there is still a fear of repercussions, and that's, I guess, the point of the policy today is to demonstrate to people who are victims of domestic abuse that we are listening, but we're able to combat those issues and reflect on them. In regards to your second question about the average, my colleague Lucy McNichol is on the committee, is on the call today, and I'll maybe ask Lucy to come in on that second point, Councillor.
Ms. McNichol.
Thank you. Through yourself, Convener. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to get back to you on the figures in terms of Aberdeen being higher than Scotland, because I don't have an answer for that at the moment. It's something that we've looked into because I think it's consistently been higher for the last few years. And like you say, it might be because we do have a good number of services in Aberdeen who are providing excellent support to victims of domestic abuse, who make them feel reassured that they can approach the council for support and advice. And I suppose if we are introducing a policy where we are wanting tenants and prospective tenants to feel comfortable enough, it might be that those figures continue to rise and continue to stay above the Scottish average, which in a way isn't a bad thing because it means that we are providing a service to those who are experiencing domestic abuse.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Through you, Convener, I've got a couple of other questions. I suppose the first one is around page 140 of the report. It mentions the exclusion orders, and I just wondered if the council supports those suffering domestic abuse to access exclusion orders. Is that something that we do?
Which officer would like to answer that? Mr. McGowan? Or, Ms. McNichol, sorry.
Yes, I think we do support them. I think it's quite difficult for housing officers to apply for exclusion orders, and it really needs to be done by the person who's experiencing domestic abuse with the support of specialist services who have knowledge in that area. But I think absolutely housing officers should be supporting those who wish to take that forward. And obviously with the the potential introduction of the Domestic Abuse Protection Bill, which is being discussed in Parliament kind of currently, that might give social landlords a bit more scope to be more supportive of exclusion orders, which will only further support victims of domestic abuse.
No, thanks very much for that, and it would be welcome, you know, once that legislation runs its course, if the committee can get a, even if it's just a short service update, just to tell us where we are with that bill. My last question, I think, is for Mr. McGowan. Well, it's really around the delegated powers, and I just wondered if there was, you know, a consideration given to the proximity of the accommodation offered to any perpetrator to the family that are, you know, or that are remaining in their own home.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes, there would be. We'd be taking issues like that into account, and the delegated power seeks to do that by suggesting that the power be changed to accommodation of appropriate size in an area of similar letting demand as determined by the chief officer. So issues like that would be taken into account. Obviously, the safety of the victim is of primacy here, and we would be considering that with partners to make sure we got that placement right.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Councillor MacDonald, there you go. Okay. Councillor Nicholl, I see you've got your hand raised.
Thank you very much, Convener. Just to say I welcome this policy. I think it shows a good piece of work, a multi-agency piece of work, but a lot of the content is very realistic and acknowledges some of the challenges that exist around dealing with these sorts of situations. Just a couple of questions, if I may, Convener. The first one relates to the references to perpetrators. I take it that that means not just convicted individuals, that's a more broad description to capture people who choose not to report their situation to the police.
Nicholl, do you want to come in there?
Thank you. Through yourself, Convener. Yes, we've used the term perpetrators as solely as someone who is committing domestic abuse, whether that's having had a charge or not. We obviously recognise that not all victims of domestic abuse are going to be ready to tell the police or want to tell the police at all about what they're going through, but we want to be an approachable service where we are person-led and we believe the victim, survivor at face value, and ensure that they are offered appropriate support and safety, whether they choose to go to the police or not. So yeah, it would be perpetrators as someone who is perpetrating domestic abuse, whether that's a charge or not.
Thank you very much. If I may, Convener, just one more question. Just in relation to the policy itself, I know from personal experience that when individuals are reported to a court process, police officers have the opportunity to not just report the evidence and the facts of a situation, but they can include some personal observations or even recommendations. And I wondered if there would be an opportunity for the policy perhaps to be an option that can be brought to the attention of the fiscal or sheriff, so that they are aware that this is sitting in the background as an added layer of safety planning for survivors. Thank you.
Nicholl, do you want to come in there, please?
Yeah, thank you. Through yourself, Convener. Yes, absolutely. We want to circulate the policy, if approved, as much as possible, so that not only tenants and prospective tenants are aware of the support available, but other agencies and statutory agencies like the police as well. Part of our work on the Violence Against Women partnership is that multi-agency working. So we will be hopefully sharing that with our colleagues in the police, and for them to take that forward to the PF as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
I see Mr. McGowan would like to come in again and answer.
Thank you. Yes, through yourself, Convener. Yeah, it was just to reiterate that point, Councillor Nicholl, that domestic abuse is also one of the project charters under the Local Outcome Improvement Plan, and we'd be looking to reflect that with this policy as well. So just to support Ms McNicholl there in that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I don't see any more hands on my list. Well, can I please also pass on my thanks to officers for really getting under the bonnet on this very thorny issue, and we've heard it described as heinous. What this abuse, we've heard it described as cowardly. I think it's all those things and an awful lot more. And many, well done. Many thanks for actually for putting this together. If we're content, members, can we go to the recommendations on page 95, please, and agree them?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. So turning now to 10.3 equalities, Mr. McGowan, can I ask you to give us another brief introduction on that as well, to take us into this?
Happy to, Convener. Thank you. Yes, this report looks at our equalities outcomes and mainstreaming. The Council obviously has a very important duty in terms of public sector equality duty to pay due regard to the need to protect the characteristics, but also to eliminate discrimination, harassment and victimisation, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations between persons who share relevant protected characteristics and those who do not. And it's obviously a duty that we take very seriously. The report that you have today is in two parts. One is to note the progress of the equality outcomes for 2017 to 2021 as per Appendix 1, but also to note the ongoing work to mainstream equality and identify new priorities for the years 2021 to 2025. Now, you'll see a great deal of detail in there. It's a very extensive report. The team have done a great job in presenting the work that's been ongoing and also the planned work and the future plans for 2021 to 2025 that you have before you have been consolidated after discussions and consultation with a wide range of partners, including equalities partners that we work with and community groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Can I now ask if any members have questions? I don't see any. Oh, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. I was kind of waiting for somebody else to get in first, to be honest. Listen, this, what a read for a start, and well done to the team for putting it together. I suppose my first question is around 3.8 in the covering report, and it mentions COVID-19 and particular communities with protected characteristics that have been affected. But the one that's in there that there's not in there, but it's not really, it's probably it's not a minority or a community, is for me is women, and we had very successful International Women's Day event on Monday there, and it came up quite often in that and in the press and on social media over the course of this week that women have been impacted differently and impacted more greatly by COVID in many cases. So it was just to highlight that. And secondly, just it's one of these things that you can come back to again and again. To be honest, it's not a document for me that should just go on the shelf. I think it's something that I would want to be able to refer to, and I will. And I did wonder if there was part of that report about our staff and whether it would, in some way, that we could share that perhaps once we've approved, if that's what we decide to do, the recommendations. But we just with consulting the convener of staff governance, that we pass it on to them so that it can be shared with them, and I'm sure that would be helpful, because it is that kind of document that there's so much in it, that, you know, there are bits of it that could be parcelled out to other places or other people. So it was just to give that consideration if the committee was minded to do that. Or...
Mr. McGowan, do you want to come in there?
Thank you, through yourself, Convener. Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Yes, we would be looking to do that. We also have, I think it's noted in the report, a very successful Equalities Ambassadors network within the council, which is staff from across the organisation who meet regularly to discuss these issues. So definitely something we'd be looking to promote. I'll certainly be doing it alongside the Equalities team in my own cluster, and we can certainly put something online for a blog, for example, to make sure that it's widely accessible. Thanks.
Councillor MacDonald, yes, I think she is happy with that. Councillor Henrickson.
Thank you, Convener. And Councillor MacDonald, I'm in a similar situation to Councillor MacDonald there. I was waiting for someone else to start. She just beat me to it. I'd just like to congratulate the authors of the report on a very, very comprehensive report, very interesting reading. And I was just going to ask a question about ongoing training for council staff. I've worked in an area where cultural awareness was really, really critical. And I know that in the past we've had, as elected members, we've had various cultural awareness, such as with the Gypsy Travellers and with the blind, which I found very, very useful. And I just wondered if we've got a programme going forward within the council workforce and indeed with elected members to improve cultural awareness of various groups, because sometimes I think once you have an understanding of a group, it removes a lot of the prejudices and issues that could lead to more serious misunderstandings. Thank you.
Mr. McGowan, do you want to come in there?
Yes, through yourself, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Henrickson. It is something that we are looking at. Like I said, the Equalities Ambassadors Network are putting some work together along the lines you suggest, and there are a number of ways we're looking at it. For example, council reports that come forward have integrated impact assessments, and that's part of an overall plan to raise awareness of equalities issues and make sure, obviously, from a governance level, that authors are taking account of any policies, and that's an important aspect of it. There are awareness raising programmes already in place, and I have a colleague, Faizan Asif, who's the author of the report, on the call today, who might be able to provide some more information on that if you're happy, Convener.
Yes, please.
Through yourself, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Henrickson. I wanted to mention as well that at the moment there is a group forming between our team, the Equalities team, and a group within People's Development, and to review the program of training in relation to equality. And the idea is assess all the training that is available and finding the gaps so that we can provide a training. And cultural awareness is definitely one of the training that we want to include, as well as providing a calendar of events that are happening at national and international and in relation to different equalities events and equalities celebrations, so that we can provide training in relation to that.
Thank you, Ms. Nazif. Councillor Henrickson, do you have a sub-bill?
No, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Fuzzy and Nazif and Derek McGowan regarding those. I hope I pronounced your name correctly there. Thank you very much. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Councillor Dunbar, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Convener. My question, I think, is in two parts. The document is a live document, I'm assuming, and therefore any legislative changes that come around in the life of the document, it would be then updated to reflect that. And the second part is around, you know, the business about fostering good relations. So I'm aware sometimes, I'll give you the example of the Disability Equity Partnership. So sometimes we have different disability groups, you know, like if come up against each other, because the nature of the disabilities mean that some solutions won't work for both the groups. And we saw that quite a bit when we did the development for like Marshall Square. And I'm just wondering, you know, there was quite a lot of work that was done later on to try and look at, you know, how we might meet some of those needs. But, you know, we're aware, for example, that I think some of the, you know, the blind community still, you know, like don't feel that that's been fully addressed. So I know that's quite a complex question, and I think it's a kind of ongoing challenge in terms of, you know, like it's not a one size fits all in terms of equalities or equity.
Yeah.
If you're happy for me to come in, convener. In terms of your first question, Councillor Dunbar, yes, this is a live document, and the equalities outcomes we're proposing would be updated to amend or amended to reflect any change in legislation. I believe there is potentially some legislation coming through over the next couple of years that would look at human rights and introduce separate measures, and there's a consolidation aspect of that. So yes, absolutely, legislation will always be reflected in the policy, and any major changes I'm sure will be brought back to committee for approval if the changes were required. In terms of the second part, yes, it can be difficult. I think there's an important aspect to make sure that all the communities in the city feel involved and feel that they've been heard and consulted with. There is always a difficulty in making, you know, it's difficult to please everyone in a general sense. And I know our director, Andy McDonald, meets with the Disability Equity Partnership regularly and is aware of some of these issues. So I think what I would say at the moment, Councillor, is that the commitment is there to engage with those with protected characteristics and those without as well, and do what we can from a council perspective to make sure that all voices have been heard. And I think as councillors, where decisions are needed, that you're fully briefed and appraised of what the issues that have been raised are, so you can make informed choices.
Right. Thank you. And also I welcome the report and the excellent work that's gone into preparing it, especially, you know, the level of consultation that took place to make sure it was shaped, you know, like by all equality groups. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can see there could be one or two other officers who would also like to add just add some more information. Mrs. Beattie.
Thank you, convener. I was just going to reflect on Councillor Dunbar's point that yes, those issues around about the public realm are very tricky in terms of trying to meet all the needs of people with equality needs. But the beauty of this document is because it's live, it means that we can actually take some of those lessons learned and improve it. So the issues that we had in Broad Street, we managed to significantly improve the outcome for many groups when we looked at the art gallery entrances. So as well as those sort of internal improvement projects, there's also the work that we have to do round about the statutory requirements through building standards around about access. So it's never easy, and you know, we appreciate all the help that we can get from people who are experiencing these issues, but it is something we're very aware of and try and take account of.
Thank you, Ms. Beattie. Do you want to come in again, Councillor Dunbar?
Thank you, Ms. Beattie. That's really helpful. I mean, obviously, as a member of DEP, I'm aware of the huge amount of work really that has happened, and also the kind of commitment to improvement through learning in terms of different projects in the city centre that can sometimes bring their own challenges depending on their location. Thank you.
Thanks. So I see Councillor Dunbar, there's still a hand raised. I suspect it was the hand you had raised before that didn't get put down. So if I've got no more questions, can we then turn to the recommendations on page 123? I think I'll actually read through them because there's quite a few of them. They're quite complex. So we're asking committee to note the ongoing work to mainstream equality in the council as detailed in the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Progress Report 2021-2025. We're asking committee to note the progress of the Equality Outcomes 2017 to 2021 as contained in Appendix 1 of the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Progress Report 2021-2025. We're asking committee to note the report findings from engagement with communities as contained in Appendix 5. We're asking committee to approve the equality outcomes for Aberdeen City Council for 2021 to 2025, including corporate equality outcomes for the council as an employer, education equality outcomes, all as detailed in the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Progress Report 2021-2025. We're asking committee to approve the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Progress Report 2021 to 2025, insofar as it relates to Aberdeen City Council, be published on the Aberdeen City Council website. And last but not least, we're asking committee to approve that the council's employee information as contained in Appendix 2 to the Equality Outcomes and Mainstreaming Progress Report 2021 to 2025 be published on the Aberdeen City Council website. Are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. I don't want to read that again. Thank you.
Agreed.
Members and officers, thank you very much indeed for this afternoon. Have a good day, as they say.
Okay.
I'll just
Well,
stop recording now.
Thank you.